the first chapter of your book, Flamingo, the main book. And ironically, this chapter has been titled The Last Lesson. The very first chapter has been titled The Last Lesson. And this chapter, I will read about the author first. It has been written by Alphonse Daudet from 1840 to 1897. Who was he? He was a French novelist and short story writer. The last lesson is set in the days of the Franco-Prussian War that took place in the years 1870 to 1871, in which France was defeated by Prussia, led by Bismarck. Prussia then consisted of what now are the nations of Germany, Poland, and parts of Austria. In this story, the French districts of Alsace and Lorraine have passed into Prussian hands. So, what has happened? Uh, you know, what has happened here in this story? What are we talking about? We are talking about two districts of France, and those two districts are Alsace and Lorraine, and they have passed into the Prussian hands. What is happening here? France is defeated. So this story is about two districts, basically two districts of France, that is Alsace and Lorraine, and what happens to the people of those two districts, and how the people of Prussia, and how are they not only trying to control their land, but they are trying to control their minds as well. They're trying to control their hearts as well, and how they're trying to impose their language upon the French people, and that is called, there's a particular term for that, and that is called linguistic chauvinism. Can anyone just tell me what linguistic chauvinism is? What is chauvinism and what is linguistic chauvinism? Anybody from the class? बता सकते हो? Rashida. So it is a belief that one's language is superior to the others, and what happens is they try to impose their language over the French people, and they forbid them to speak their own language or to learn their own language. So this chapter is all about the dismay and the distress that is felt by the people of Alsace and Lorraine, and how difficult it is for them to bear this fact that not only their land but also their language is being snatched away from them. Okay, so it says, and this story is being narrated by a little boy, Franz. Okay, and don't get confused between France and France. And the spellings are Franz. So this little child, on this particular day, he doesn't feel like going to school, and he says, "I started for school very late that morning." He doesn't feel like, he has no idea. He's got no clue that what has happened, because of the war, whether Russia has been defeated or whatever has happened. He has no clue about that, but that particular day, he doesn't feel like going to school. And why does he not feel like going to school? Because his teacher, his French teacher, had asked him to revise the rules of participles, and he doesn't even know the P of the participles. Okay, so he has not revised that, and he dreads his teacher. He feels that his teacher is going to scold him a lot, and that is why he doesn't feel like going to school. And moreover, the weather is very fine, so he wants to enjoy. So what happens? We'll just read on. He says, "I started for school very late." Keep your books in front. The page is 2. Page number is 2 in your books. Okay. So he says, "I started," this is Franz who is narrating the story. He says, "I started for school very late that morning and was in great dread of a scolding." What do you understand by dread? Dread means, yes, great fear of a scolding, especially because M. Hamel is their French teacher, especially because M. Hamel had said that he would question us on participles. So the teacher had said that he's going to take a test, on a participle. So he did not feel like going to school, so he feared him and he had not revised. And I did not know the first word about them. For a moment, I thought of running away and spending the day out of doors. It was so warm, so bright. The birds were chirping at the edge of the woods, and in the open field back of the sawmill, the Prussian soldiers were drilling. So everything was so fascinating, everything was, so entertaining, and he didn't feel like going to school. It was all much more tempting than the rule for participles, but I had the strength to resist. What is he talking about here? Which strength is he talking about here, Riche? He says,
He had the strength to resist those temptations, the exciting things that he had, that he had.
so, and he hurried off to school. Past the town hall, there was a crowd in front of the bulletin board. For the last 2 years, all our bad news had come from there. The lost petals, the draft, the orders of the commanding officer. And I thought to myself without stopping, what can be the matter now? So he says, for the last 2 years, all our bad news had come from where? From that bulletin board. There was a bulletin board. जिस bulletin board पे सारी बुरी खबरें आ रही थी. बुरी खबरें किस चीज की आ रही थी बच्चे? बता सकते हो आप? कौन सी बुरी खबरें आ रही थी? Yes. Yes. तो वो सारी बुरी खबरें अभी अभी ही डिडंट नो अबाउट द फैक्ट दैट दे हैड लॉस्ट द बैटल, पर जो भी वॉर का कुछ में जो कुछ भी हो रहा था, फ्रैंको ऑपरेशन वॉर का, वो सारी बुरी खबरें 2 साल से वहीं पर आ रही थी. 2 साल हो गए थे ऑलमोस्ट ये वॉर को चलते हुए. सो ही जस्ट थॉट टू हिमसेल्फ व्हाट कुड बी द मैटर नाउ. बट देन एज आई हरिड बाय एज फास्ट एज आई कुड गो, द ब्लैकस्मिथ washer who was there with his apprentice. Who's an apprentice? Who is an apprentice? Apprentice कौन होता है बच्चे? Yes, yes, trainee, somebody who's getting training under someone. So he was reading the bulletin and he just called after me, don't go so fast, bub. You will get to school in plenty of time. So बोला इतना तेज इतने भाग भाग के मत जाओ, तुम्हारे पास बहुत टाइम है. So I thought he was making fun of me. I just thought that maybe he had made this statement sarcastically. मुझे समझ में नहीं आया क्योंकि मैं तो already late था. तो ये बार बार मुझे ऐसे उसने क्यों बोला? So I reached M. Hamill's little garden all out of breath. So he literally ran, and because he was already late. So he was, breathless when he reached the garden of his school. Usually, when school began, there was a great hustle which could be heard out in the street. There was a great bustle, there was a great noise which could be heard out in the street. The opening and closing of desks, lesson repeated in unison, very loud with our hands over our ears to understand better. When you speak everything in unison, what do you in chorus? जब सारे बच्चे कोरस में बोल रहे थे तो कई बार आपको समझ में नहीं आता, तो आप क्या करते हो? आप अपने कानों पे से हाथ लगा के उनको बंद करके समझने की कोशिश करते हो कि क्या चल क्या रहा है यहाँ पे. ठीक है. सो विद आवर हैंड्स ओवर आवर ears in order to understand better. And the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table. What do you understand by ruler rapping on the table? What is ruler rapping? Yes, yes, yes. Ruler slamming on the desk. कि बच्चे जब शोर में, ruler. Why would he wrap his ruler on the table in order to make the children sit quietly? Okay, but now it was all so still. Otherwise, there was so much of noise every day. There was so much of commotion. But today the thing was very different. The commotion to get to my desk without being seen. But of course, that day everything had to be as quiet as a Sunday morning. He says, I had counted on that, I had depended on that noise. मैंने क्या सोचा था कि इतना शोर शराबा होगा और मैं चुपचाप से निकल के अपनी सीट पर पहुंच जाऊंगा. ठीक है. So I had depended on that noise, on that commotion. But that day it was also still, it was as still as a Sunday morning. Through the window, I saw my classmates already in their places and M. Hamill walking up and down with his terrible iron ruler under his arm. And I had to open the door and go in before everybody. I felt so embarrassed. कि मुझे लगा था शोर शराबे में मैं निकल जाऊंगा, पर ऐसे कुछ नहीं हुआ. The teacher was there, everybody was there, the classroom was full, and the teacher had his iron ruler, under his arm, and he was just pacing up and down the room. And I had to enter the classroom in front of everybody. I felt so ashamed. I felt so embarrassed on getting late. You can imagine how I blushed because I felt embarrassed and how frightened I was. I was so, I dreaded my teacher. I had such a fear of my teacher. Frightened I was, I didn't know. But nothing happened. M. Himmel saw me and said very kindly, but I dreaded my teacher. I was afraid of him, but nothing of such sort happened. My teacher saw me and he said very kindly, go to your place quickly, little Franz. We were beginning without you. So he didn't scold me. That was quite unlike him. He didn't scold me at all. And he said, you just go to your seat and we were about to start the class without you. I jumped over the bench and sat down at my desk. Not till then, when I had got a little over my fright, did I see that a teacher had on his beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and the little black silk cap all embroidered that he never wore except on inspection and prize डेज। सो उस टाइम तक क्या था, उस टाइम तक मुझे डर ही बहुत ज्यादा था, इतना डर था मुझे कि मैं अपने आसपास कुछ देख ही नहीं पाया. The clothes that he was wearing, he normally used to wear them on prize days, on special days like inspection days or prize days. But he wondered what could be the occasion that day. So he had worn, his beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and a little black silk cap. And all these, clothes, where they were embroidered, they're beautifully embroidered. He couldn't understand what could be the reason. Besides, the whole school seemed so strange and so solemn. What is solemn? What is solemn? Yes, everything was so grave, everything was so serious. But the thing that surprised me most was to see on the back benches that were always empty, the village people sitting quietly like ourselves, old Hauser with his three-cornered hat, the former mayor, the former postmaster, and several others besides. The thing that, surprised him, that shocked him more, apart from the dress of his teacher, was that there were so many people, all the villagers had come in to attend the class that day. So there were, who all were the people? There was, Hauser, there was the former mayor, there were former postmaster, all the elderly people of the village had also come to attend the class, and several others besides. Everybody looked sad, and Hauser had brought an old primer. So what is a primer? Primer is, what is a primer? Has anyone heard of this term, primer? He had brought in an old primer. What is a primer? Is a book, wherein you learn the basics of any language. Okay, so he had brought in that the book was thumbed at the edges. It was creased, it was crumpled at the edges, the corners were crumpled, and he held it open on his knees with his great spectacles lying across the pages. So he was just trying to, learn, trying to read, but he was not able to. He had kept it on his lap. While I was wondering about it all, M. Hemmel mounted his chair, and in the same grave and gentle tone which he had used to me, he said, "My children, that day the teacher was very, speaking very softly, very gently. That was quite unlike him. And he said, he went towards his chair and he said, my dear children, this is the last lesson that I shall give you. The order has come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. The new master comes tomorrow. This is your last French lesson. I want you to be very attentive." So these were this was the news, that had been put up at the bulletin board, and this was the news that was, that fell on his ears like, lightning, that struck him like lightning, like thunderstorm, and he came to know that from that day onwards, from the next day onwards, they would not be able to learn their mother tongue. And because the order had come from Berlin that only German is going to be taught from the next day onwards, and they would not be able, no longer be able to learn French. Okay, and because these two territories, these two districts of Alsace and Lorraine had been occupied by what? By Prussia. So, what a thunderclap these words were to me. What do you understand by thunderclap? He says, "What a thunderclap." Yes. Yes, yes. Totally unexpected. It was a great shock for him. Oh, the wretches. That was what they had put up on the town hall. My last French lesson. Why? I hardly knew how to write. I should never learn any more. I must stop there. Then, oh, how sorry I was for not learning my lessons, for seeking birds' eggs or going sliding on the Saar. My books that had seemed such a nuisance a little while ago, so heavy to carry, my grammar, my history of the saints were old friends now that I couldn't give up. And M. Hamel too, the idea that he was getting away, that I should never see him again, made me forget all about his ruler and how cranky he was. So he says that this was the time when he suddenly started developing a liking, a fascination for his mother tongue. He says the kind of the grammar, the history which he had not liked so far, suddenly he started feeling a kind of a fascination for grammar and history. And he said that even the teacher M. Hemmel, he had dreaded him so far, but now because he was leaving and now because he would not be able to meet him ever again, he felt that he had already started missing his language as well as his teacher. Suddenly he started liking his teacher, liking his language, and he felt that it would be so sad and it would be so bad that he would not be able to learn his language anymore. Till that point of time, he says, what do you understand by this? He says, my grammar, my history, they were old friends now that I couldn't give up. Just like you don't want to give up on your old friends, you want to have them with you throughout your life, your lifetime. So similarly, he says that I don't want to give up my language. I want to learn it. I don't know, and most of the people don't even know how to write their mother tongue properly, and this language is going to be snatched away from them. Poor man. It was in honor of this last lesson that he had put up on his fine Sunday clothes, and now I understood why the old men of the village were sitting there in the back of the room. It was because they were sorry too that they had gone to school, that they had not gone to school more. All the people of the village had gathered there that day because they also wanted to pay a tribute not only to the teacher but also to their language, because they had not put in more efforts to learn their language. It was their way of thanking our master for his 40 years of selfless, faithful service, selfless service, and of showing their respect for the country that was theirs no more. The country that was being snatched away from them, the language that was being snatched away from them. So it was a kind of an attempt by Prussians. What was the attempt? The attempt was not only to rule over the territory, but also to rule over their minds and also to rule over their hearts. So this was what they were trying to do. While I was thinking of all this, I heard my name called, because they had been expected to learn participles, rules of participles that day, so the teacher called him. It was my turn to recite. What was he supposed to recite? The rules of the participles. What would I not have given to be able to say that dreadful rule for the participle all through, very loud and clear and without one mistake? What do you mean by this line? What is
Efforts that he has not put in so that he could recite that rules of participles without any mistake. Yes. So he just wants to say that he could have given away his everything, to speak out those rules of participle without a fumble.
फंबल? ठीक है, बिना किसी फंबल के, बिना किसी गलती के, अगर वो पार्टिसिपल्स के रूल्स बोल पाता तो वो उसके लिए कुछ भी अपना दे सकता था. So he says, but how could he say that? How could he recite the rules when he had not revised them? But I got mixed up on the first words and I stood there holding on to my desk, my heart beating, and I was not even daring to look up. I felt so ashamed. I felt so embarrassed that I didn't even, dare to look up. I heard M. Hammer's smile, but the teacher did not scold me that day. He said, I won't scold you, little Franz. You must feel bad enough. तुम्हें खुद ही इतना बुरा लग रहा होगा, मैं तुम्हें नहीं डांटूंगा. See how it is. Every day we have said to ourselves, bah, I've plenty of time. I'll learn it tomorrow. And now you see where you have come out. That's the great trouble with essays. She puts off learning till tomorrow. So that is the trouble with us all. It is not only the trouble with the people of essays, not only the trouble with people of Lorraine, it is the trouble with everybody. It is human nature. What do? You try, this is known as procrastination. And what is procrastination? The act of delaying things, putting off things until tomorrow. But as you know, tomorrow never comes. ठीक है, वो कभी निकल तो कभी नहीं आएगा, कल जो होगा वो आज होगा. अब फिर बोलोगे हम कल करेंगे, आज नहीं, हमारे पास बहुत टाइम है, हमारे +2 के बोर्ड तो भी साल पड़ा है, हम बाद में करेंगे, 8 महीने पड़े, 9 महीने पड़े, 10 महीने पड़े. बट eventually when the time comes you hardly have any time left. So this is the same case that has happened with this people. He says this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the trouble with essays, that people of essays, they keep on postponing things. Now what, just look at yourself where you have reached. अब क्या हो गया है, तुम्हारे पास तुम्हारी लैंग्वेज ही नहीं है सीखने के लिए, तुम्हें सीखने को मिले ही कि नहीं, अब क्या करोगे आप? ठीक है. So he says she puts off learning till tomorrow. Now those fellows out there will have the right to say to you, which fellows is he talking about? The Prussians. What would they say? How is it you pretend to be Frenchmen and yet you can neither speak nor write your own language? तुम दिखावा करते हो कि आप यू आर फ्रेंचमैन, पर ना तो तुम बोल सकते हो, ना ही तुम लिख सकते हो. But you are not the worst, poor little Franz. We have all a great deal to reproach ourselves with. What do you, we are all to be blamed. We all have to criticize ourselves. We are to put to blame for this folly of ours. Okay, so this is what he says. तुम अकेले नहीं हो. Each and everybody is to be blamed. So this is what the teacher says. So I just put an end to our lecture today. On Monday, we'll continue with this chapter. We'll discuss the question answers also. But you need to download Zoom, and I'll send you a link for Zoom class from Monday.